Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar focused on meaningful and measurable DE&I, a continuation of last month's 3 big questions and 3 research insights approach. So last month we covered our key questions about what the research can tell us about workplace flexibility and what matters most to the employee experience. You all had really great questions and the dialogue was quite insightful. So thank you for submitting. Your questions keep coming. Today, we will be covering a topic at the core of the MOM Project's mission, advancing greater diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. We exist to advocate, champion, and make progress towards greater workplace equity. Everyone on this panel, personally and professionally, prioritizes learning what creates the most significant impact and doing everything possible to elevate those insights. This leads us to Werklabs research teams. As you know, Werklabs is the research arm of the MOM Project, and Werklabs' most recent published study, Meaningful and Measurable DE&I, provides a new framework for DE&I programming to help partners elevate what is most influential and meaningful DE&I impact. So if you were here last week, you remember my name is Rachel Jarvis Bossard, fondly referred to as RJB, and I am a manager of partnership success for our contingent workspace and clients. And my MOM Project journey started shortly after having my first child last year. By no means is my story a unique one. Girl meets corporate America, builds a career, then decides to start a family, only to start uncovering layer by layer the many inequities within the corporate structure she supported for years, solely based on the change of her status to mom. There was so much fire in me not to accept the status quo. So when the MOM Project came knocking, I was more than ready to answer the call. I am joined today by our amazing panelists, who I have the extreme pleasure of also calling coworkers, Ela Javid, Customer Success Manager at the MOM Project, and Adrienne Young, Director of Customer Impact at Werklabs, our Research and Impact Division. And I'll let them go into more details with their introductions.
Thank you, RJB. I'm really feeling a longtime listener, first-time caller vibe today, as I've watched the MOM Project webinars for quite some time now, long before I actually was an employee here. My brief bio, I have over 15 years of experience in human resources, with the majority of my time focused specifically on compensation consulting and surveys. After a longer break from my career focused on caring for my family, I began looking to rejoin the workforce and quickly came to truly understand and feel that motherhood penalty and experienced many of those inequities that RJB just referenced. I'm so grateful and so proud to be at the MOM Project, a company whose mission and value are very close to my heart. As RJB just mentioned, I am on the customer success team here at the MOM Project, and I am so excited to be discussing a topic frequently discussed with clients we know share this future work priority. My team partners with clients to ensure we achieve the partnership goals outlined and extend value within your larger organization's workplace strategies. Part of that role is hearing the challenges you're facing and working to create potential solutions together. First, thank you for submitting and sharing such rich questions. I know today will illuminate and provide some real tangible ways to think about DE&I. I'll pass it over to my colleague, Adrienne, to introduce herself.
Great, thanks, Ela. Hi, everyone. I just want to acknowledge off the bat, I'm so giddy to get into this topic because DE&I and social impact has been a core passion of mine for the past decade. So I'm Adrienne Young, and I'm part of the Werklabs Research and Insights Division of the MOM Project. And my role is really the strategic liaison between the research team and our partner organizations. So I prioritize helping create these bridges of impact. So when we learn what's coming out in the research and what that reveals, I want to think about the the implication that that can have on your workplace and on your strategic goals. So that's really where I step in. My background is in social impact, change management, organization development. And that is what makes the idea of getting to cover DE&I programming so exciting, because it's crucial to the employee experience and it really impacts organizations' productivity, the holy grail, right? The employee sense of belonging, and the ability to attract and retain really quality talent. So effective DE&I is a really additive, enriching part of a culture contribution. It boosts innovation, creative potential. It just really helps with a thriving workplace. And it's also influential to your bottom line. So we're really excited to make this clear case for prioritizing DE&I programming.
Yeah, absolutely. So DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion, has been a silent player within many organizations for quite some time. It was a workplace aspiration, but not necessarily imperative. That is until 2020, when companies scrambled to voice their support against a lot of social unrest and created and filled new positions for chief diversity officers, pledging to increase their efforts to hire, retain, and support underrepresented groups. Now it seems many are at this stage where, as an organization, particularly following the death of George Floyd, that made a public commitment to prioritize DE&I, more than 2 years later, aren't sure how to assess or show progress as news outlets begin questioning the nature of their commitments, performative or sustainable. Is that a shared or typical experience, Adrienne?
Yeah, I mean, exactly, RJB. That's one of the reasons why this study was so important. So even last year, Harvard Business Review and SHRM teamed up to do a survey that was around creating a culture of DE&I, and over 70% of the leaders that responded to that said that they strongly agree that their efforts are behind, their DE&I efforts are behind where they should be, and only about 12% of responding organizations are making those metrics public. And only about a third are providing those metrics or visibility into the progress they're making around DE&I to their own employee base. So that gives us kind of a great indicator that matches what we hear in our client conversations, that while it's really well intended and a lot of people are putting tons of effort around DE&I programming, it's hard to figure out how to best track or gauge impact. Mm-hmm. And then more importantly, to really be able to discern what's the most meaningful of those efforts to the people inside the organizations. So we wanted to help really get our arms around what you can use and what you can tell is having meaningful impact, because that's why we made the commitment in the first place. A lot of these organizations wanted to drive meaningful change. So being able to assess and gauge what's working is the best indicator that we're moving in the right direction. So the things that we hear and that we see from the survey data of the report I just covered that are most often tracked are the metrics that are more easily quantifiable. So it's a lot of the inputs. So it's things like, what are the dollars invested in our programming? What are the number of ERG groups? What are maybe the percentages of our employee base that have been trained? And so all of that is good to know, but it kind of limits the purview we have around our DE&I story. It's not giving us the full impact narrative. So we wanted to look at what's the connective thread of what those things are doing, or the consequential impact that's having on our people inside the organizations, and then on the performance from the organizations. So we use a really rigorous methodology that revealed 5 key metrics that are really rooted in that employee experience that are most strongly driving employees' sense of satisfaction around DE&I in their workplaces, and how that links then back to outcomes like retention, productivity, and again, that sense of belonging. So when we're able to do that in a way that tethers to performance, that helps us make a business case for what a lot of us already inherently know, is that DE&I is really meaningful to organizations and to the people that power them. And when we know that and we understand that and we can make that business case, it lets us get more intentional and effective in our progress. So the results are really profound, and that's why I'm just so excited to share. We've all had these conversations with advocates inside organizations, and this lets us fuel better champions inside, because we can give the clarity and validation to make the business case too.
Adrienne, that's fascinating. Honestly, knowing the Werklabs approach centers on the employee experience makes it invaluable. truly understanding that perspective and how it links to performance outcomes helps our allies inside companies make that business case. I'm hungry, obviously, for this critical work. This often comes up in client conversations about knowing what's working regarding DE&I efforts inside the business or how you can validate it.
Yeah, I love what you said, Adrienne, about figuring out what works and what's not working. I know in the contingent space, a lot of things that we hear or come up against is a DE&I spend and focus on that. But how does that translate into, results within the business? Like, do they even correlate to each other? And our first burning question, is what we've heard from so many of you wanting to know what's working or what's effective in terms of DE&I measures. So let's start with that. Adrienne, does this research offer a way to tell or even evaluate what's working? And what does working even mean? Like, what's the context of that?
I mean, yeah, I'll say yes. Yes, it does. And first, it's helpful to kind of orient ourselves towards the idea of that most meaningful part. So around the human experience. And that's why I said before around the consequential effects. So our team really looked at, again, what is the effect of what those programs are doing on the people inside the organizations, and then again linking that back to what does that mean for the performance of the business. So the metrics most common right now, like we covered, are again those percentage dollars, quantifiable amounts, and those metrics give us something to hold on to and point to, but they certainly again don't give us that clear picture. So what we wanted to do is think about and consider and look at DEI as a journey, instead of this finite list of checkboxes, right? So how do we complete DE&I? Well, we don't. We track progress along the way. That's essential. So in this study, we outlined those drivers that are not really very easily visible, but they're the intangible aspects. They're essential to understand, and they're the things that are again rooted in the employee experience, and then how again that connects back to performance. So regardless of where you're at on that journey, what are the drivers that are really compelling and influential to the employee experience around DEI? So we're going to look at those right now. We're going to talk about them. So the first is really this idea of DE&I commitment. So number one, is it genuine? Is it sincerely motivated? Is it top down? Is it consistent? That's one of the drivers or predictors that's most influential around the employee's sentiment of satisfaction around DEI. The second is around implementation. So is it clear and transparent what your goals are related to DE&I? Do we have visibility and established ERGs? Are we having consistent DE&I trainings? Are those mandatory? Is everyone participating? That's number two. Number three is around equity climate. Is there fair, equitable pay? Is it really clear to understand how to advance? Are the pathways universal? Do we all kind of advance in the same tracks in the same ways? Is the distribution of work even? Is it clear on teams and individuals how that's being divvied up? Number four is around diversity climate. So from recruiting through representation all the way up at the top. Are we intentional around having diverse backgrounds brought into the organization and then channeled up through to even the highest levels? And then the last is around inclusive climate. So are feedbacks and opinions welcome? Are they respected? Do we solicit that input? Do we want to hear it? And then some pragmatic things like inclusive services, like assistive technology, nursing rooms, things like this. This is, again, how we see it demonstrated and activated inside of our organizations. So those things, again, which is DE&I commitment, the level of implementation, equity climate, diversity climate, and inclusive climate are those 5 drivers that are most influential to the employee's level of satisfaction around DE&I and work. And the reason that it matters so much, and this is where that business case comes in, is that the outcomes for organizations doing this well, that do reach that kind of high level of employee satisfaction, have 50% higher rates of retention, 51% higher rates of likelihood to recommend, which is a direct pipeline builder, 39% higher intended productivity from their employees. And then that, again, holy grail, I always call a sense of belonging, 31% higher rates of sense of belonging among their team. So it's just incredibly profound, the amount of impact it has on your employees and then again, connected to bottom line.
Yeah, and it's incredibly powerful and encouraging to hear outcomes related to productivity, retention, recommendation, and belonging that represent all the facets. So many organizations are prioritizing pipeline from referrals, staving off short timers, motivating teams, and ensuring everyone feels like this is a culture of belonging. From a personal standpoint, I can say that I've had other times in my career where I found myself wondering who made this decision for certain things that were being implemented. And are they aware of how it is affecting and alienating a huge segment of the company workforce by enforcing something that is seemingly beneficial, but beneficial for whom, right? Maybe a small section, and the transparency of feedback and the openness to get that, a structure that's inclusive, taking individual into account, and a clear path to feedback and flexibility to pivot if things aren't working. So I can see how that would be high performing. Ela, what are some of the cornerstones your clients prioritize?
What's interesting is that we're often talking about these types of outcomes: retaining talent, referrals from existing employees, fostering that sense of belonging. But we're not often connecting those outcomes to DE&I efforts. Keeping the connection of DE&I programming in the foreground of our considerations around those outcomes is important. As a talent marketplace, things like 57% higher retention, wow, and 51% higher likelihood to recommend is staggering. In the simplest terms, Adrienne, will you share how DE&I relates to those outcomes?
Sure. I'll say it in the simplest terms I can, but I will say that it's a really rigorous process. So it begins by the research team really analyzing the existing qualitative research on the topic. So in this case, DE&I. So what are those firsthand stories, or what are the employee experiences of people inside organizations related to that topic? That helps then inform a really relevant questionnaire that lets the team do a quantitative evaluation that tells us what those predictors are around their sense of satisfaction on DEI. And that, again, is what ultimately impacts performance measures. So as they uncover those drivers or those predictors of DEI, so in this case, those are the 5 we just reviewed, they're able to make that next level connection to the employee's sense of belonging, their productivity, their likelihood to stay, and their likelihood to recommend their organization. So that's kind of how it all weaves together to tell us these indicators. Oh, RJB, you're on mute.
I do apologize. Trying to keep it so that the focus is on you. Our experiences at work affect our performance at work. So that makes perfect sense. And your team is tracking the specific ways these experiences are influenced by DE&I programming?
That's exactly right. So the research team heard from more than 1,500 people, and they used that robust methodology we just covered. So Dr. Pam Cohen leads the research team, and she's a social scientist and behavioral researcher with a specialized expertise in predictive analytics. So the priority is to really acutely understand the human experience that tells us about that next level impact on the performance. So an example would be that one of the respondents said something to the effect, or let me find the verbatim. Diversity in a workplace helps me feel like I have a chance at being seen and heard. So if we can imagine being able to understand how that feeling influences how people work, that's what the research affords. It's talking to us and demonstrating for us the outcomes of having those sentiments about DE&I inside your work. That's what this study is helping with.
That's awesome. And you can't argue with that, right? And Adrienne, we've partnered on quite a few webinars. So I'm going to quote you here in saying that you can't argue with facts, right? You can have an opinion about them, but it doesn't change that some things just are. What is changeable is your reaction to those facts or this data. and what valuable insights to have. So let's move on to burning question number 2. So company X has identified a DE&I gap within the org. Where do they start? How do they start? This question was asked in a few different ways. Ela, can you talk a little bit about your conversations with your clients around this?
Yes. So in our daily discussions around DE&I, many organizations need help figuring out where to start or what's working. Maybe they've done unconscious bias training, but they're still figuring out what else to do. Perhaps they're striving for gender parity, but not attracting a lot of female talent into their pipeline. Some want to offer greater transparency, but need to figure out how to start or what to share. So it can vary widely depending on the client. My question is, what guidance can this study offer in terms of where to start?
Yeah, it's a fair question. It's a good question. And it's a really important one. And what the study really reinforces is, again, this notion of DE&I as a journey. So as organizations move from considering to implementing to fully integrated in their DE&I efforts, those metrics or those drivers we talk about would logically evolve. So a clear theme, though, that emerges from the data across the spectrum is this idea that high-level organization support is really fundamental to that positive employee experience. So starting with a clear, honest assessment of where your organization's at on the journey, it provides the starting point that's necessary. Knowing there's a continuum, it's really essential to know where our org culture is at on our journey today so that you can determine where to best focus and channel your energy, your dollars, your efforts to advance most effectively, or to align with our study name, most meaningfully.
And so let's say this company X has identified this, or they're trying to identify this, but they don't have the internal resources. Adrian, is this something Werklabs can help assess if organizations need to figure out where they fall on the spectrum? Can they engage Werklabs to do this for them and outsource that?
Well, absolutely. And it's about our favorite thing to do. So yes, and yes is the answer, yes. In fact, a diagnostic that's really tailored to the employee experience occurring within your own organization would give you those critical insights to know where to prioritize investments based on where you're at. It also then can show that kind of really rich outcome that's the anticipated effect on organizational performance. So it really helps to discern strategic decision-making, and then allows for that really transparent tracking and reporting externally, because you know where you're going and why you're going that way so that you can monitor that progress over time.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up, Adrian. And what a great tool. We have had clients ask for a diagnostic evaluation of their DE&I efforts for the past few years, or even for data reinforcement to support their budget requests for the upcoming fiscal year. A dashboard or assessment would remove that guesswork and speculation and provide a clear picture of what's happening. The segmentation would also be great for our partners with a contingent workforce represented, or to pair with EEO reporting data tools. There's just so much potential. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad. So sorry to interject, Ela, but we can offer, so we can deliver those outcomes in a dashboard format. I'm glad you brought that up. And the dashboard that we use, the interface that we use, allows you to also segment variables. So you could show from different slices of your org population. You could look at it demographically. So you could depict and show it in a lot of different ways. So I'm glad you brought that up. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, and Ela, you mentioned the contingent workforce, where I primarily focus and support my clients, and highlighting the importance of the DE&I focus and supporting that segment, that incoming segment of contingent workers. And with some companies having 20 to 35% of their workforce being contingent, and conversion rates being 30 to 45%, understanding that meeting the needs of that segment within DE&I can have a huge impact in retention, and ultimately, if you're converting, will shape your organization over time.
Yeah, that's really that's a cornerstone of working with Werklabs, is that the metrics measured really help guide organizational next steps around prioritizing the highest impact actions that maximize the beneficial returns for employees and also for the business. So yeah, Yes, yes, yes.
You know, we hear that from our talent partners all the time, how important representation and DE&I priorities are to the community, how overt the employer brand communicates and makes visible their DE&I goals. Commitment and progress matters in attracting talent too.
That's so true, Eli. In fact, a LinkedIn survey found that when considering a job opportunity, after salary or pay rate, 63% of applicants stated having a company's mission statement for DE&I was a deciding factor for acceptance of an offer. 76% of contingent workers surveyed indicated that employers being aligned with their personal values foster feelings of belongings. These need to be stated upfront and can be a huge advantage when added to a job description, even from initial contact with a potential employee to retaining longevity with the employee after hiring. DE&I seems to influence the complete cycle of the employee experience, which leads to our final burning question. Knowing that it is somewhat variable, but as we talk DE&I, do we know what metrics impact attracting and retaining diverse employees as a subset to the general employee population, Adrian?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and there's the answer slightly varies based on the demographic segment. I do want to just make note of something you just said, RJB, which is, and we've talked about this a lot. In a lot of cases, our company partners are reserving those conversations for in interview, right? To be able to talk about the prioritization of DEI in the interview process. But as you just mentioned, I think it's important to note that that's actually a screening criteria for candidates themselves. The talents are using that as a determinant of who they will be engaging with. So I think it's important, like you said, at the onset, make it clear on your website, put it in your job listing description, things like that. So you get to entertain that conversation in the first place. But to your question about retaining diverse employees, I would say that from the study that we did, and we can do some demographic segmentation for women, Black, and Asian surveyed professionals, that level of commitment, top down, again, that it's sincerely motivated, that it's really consistent, was the metric that was most positively impacting their level of satisfaction. And then for Latino professionals, it was really around that implementation. So how clear and transparent are the goals? Do I have an ERG group to join? Are there trainings happening? That was the most critical. Either way, though, I would say for women and underrepresented groups of employees, they're all just really craving this level of overt organizational commitment that shows up in tangible ways. Is it demonstratively visible around me, and is it overt in how it's shared?
And, we have been studying and assessing this DE&I topic for quite some time. Like I said, it's a cornerstone of the Mom Project mission. And Werklabs has an additional study that we released earlier this year that says what matters most to the contingent workforce. We did a 2-part webinar about it. And please reach out to your CSM partner if you'd like to learn a little bit more about that. Most of that content can be transferred to your FTE workforce as well. And while we all tend to view equity as important, 90.2% Black contingent workers place particular significant emphasis on equity, followed closely by Hispanic and Latino contingent workers. Also, 86.9% female contingent workers rate equity as being critical, which is significantly higher than their male counterparts at 81.7%. So this is really something that is critical that we need to focus on and really put some intent behind. And again, we've tons of research on it that we are more than happy to share with you.
Absolutely. As a member of the customer success team, please do use us. We are here to partner and consult creatively to really provide solutions to what your challenges are. So little plug for the CSM team there. And back to the stats, I know members in our talent community will talk about the visibility of DE&I across the organization, whether it was evident from the job listing or featured on the employer website and then into the interview experience. Unsurprisingly, those who prioritize this value are impacted in their daily experience of the level of DE&I satisfaction.
Exactly. That's just really where that level of commitment comes in and how it materializes and takes shape. The study is really intended to help leaders move beyond DE&I, again, as that start and stop list of tasks, and instead to really consider it as something that that progresses and is tracked across time, that we look at measurably and meaningfully as it's impacted in the employee experience or the people inside our organizations, which is also what drives our organizations. So using that kind of people first framework helps us reimagine what's, like you said at the beginning, RJB, what does success mean? How do we measure and evaluate it? This is just one of those topics that permeates the culture and speaks volumes to the idea of values alignment. So when talent is considering either as a prospective talent or as an existing employee, do my company's values, beliefs, and subsequent behaviors align with my own? That's where we get that true sense of belonging. That's not something you can just switch on and off inside an organization. That's an outflow that comes from the everyday work experiences, the cues and signals, the policies and procedures that are in place. And that's what allows that authentic self at work to really shine, which is all connected to DE&I satisfaction.
Oh, yes. And it's such an important and influential topic. And the business case offers a compelling motive to keep DE&I front and center. Thank you, RJB and Adrian, for today and for elevating and helping us advance on these issues. And thank you to all of our company partners.
Thank you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Thank you all for participating and for being present in this discussion. I think it's so important anytime we can illustrate the business case for how greater, more equitable, inclusive, diverse organizations also advance business itself. So thank you for your time and participation, Ela and RJB, and for everyone in the webinar.
Well, I was really excited to be a part of this one. This is a topic that's most dear to my heart in kind of moving that initiative forward within our partner companies. So this concludes this portion of our webinar session. And existing customers, if you logged on with your customer specific link, please feel free to stay on. And we're going to try to field some of those questions that you've submitted beforehand. Thank you to the rest of our participants that joined. We will be in touch with you with our details of next month's webinar chat on returnships, bringing women back to work. Really excited for that. But thanks, everyone. We will start our Q&A in about 10 seconds once we have everyone with their specific link still here. Okay, well, everyone that's still hanging on, thanks again. We have your questions. We're going to go through them. I believe we're going to get some of them pulled up on the screen. So yes, we are. So we're going to start with question number 1 that was submitted. We've had a lot of debate around whether to show our DE&I programming at set points across time or as a traditional year-end overview. What does your team think about that? Adrian, I think that would be best for you as far as how to present your progress DE&I.
Sure. I think rather than focusing on the interval, we'd really just recommend establishing a way to demonstrate progress. So again, rather than what are we going to implement and that we did it, instead tracking progress against some of the metrics we outlined here today. The ability to show that the intentional way you're approaching how meaningful your programming is and that is moving the needle over time towards those metrics is the thing that really strengthens and amplifies the effect of that on your people and your performance. So being able to transparently show that and to be able to consistently demonstrate progress is what I'd prioritize focusing on. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, that makes sense. So don't put a timing on it. Just be very transparent. I agree that should help within the org and allow people to feel that sense of belonging, that you are being so transparent about all these things. Question number 2. What are others doing to get more diversity in applicants? For example, where to post jobs, the type of marketing to do, etc. Any thoughts that you can share, Ela?
Yes. Well, I think the answer is clear. Work with the Mom Project. We just recently crossed a major threshold with our talent community. Over 1 million moms, dads, and allies.
Yeah.
Amazing. This strong, diverse talent community, along with working with a dedicated team of experts specialized in advocating for moms and allies, is an amazing resource.
Thanks, Celia. I second that notion. The power of getting to work with a team like Ela and RJB and the extended network we have here is incredible. And we also know from the research that elevating intentional DE&I programming can be an incredible way to also bolster your pipeline, because existing employees will then begin recommending and doing some of that lift for you. Secondarily, we know that from other data studies that things like flexibility or things that are important to a diverse talent group that are being demonstrated and activated within your organization are also important drivers to attracting diverse representation. So in addition to the means and outlets you're using, the formulation of your cultural criteria in the first place is also great, because then your own talent will help with that attracting by advocating and referring you. So I would say that's a good way.
I'm going to double down on Ela's plug for our 1 million moms, dads, and allies community growing that we've got. I think what makes it strong is the data shows that 85% of moms are more likely to choose the Mom Project as their representative when looking for work. And that's because we fostered this environment of supporting her through her journey and meeting her where she's at, whether it's through our RISE program of upskilling women within technology, or pairing her with a mentor for one of our rally cohorts, or whether we're helping her in events, in networking, resume building. I mean, we really just stand so close to our community. And that is just such a diverse and robust community to tap into. Shameless plug. So definitely, if you want to know where to go, right here. Yeah. Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Adrienne and Ela. Question 3 says, how important are ERGs in the equation?
Oh, the short answer is very. So that they're very important. So in terms of the DE&I implementation driver that we covered, ERGs and their ability to provide an outlet and visibility to representation and the demonstration of DEI commitment is incredibly important. It's important to acknowledge, though, that the role of ERGs should be one of being resourced and supported and valued by leadership, rather than in some cases they can be put in kind of the seat of driving some of the DE&I metrics and goals, or being responsible for that, which that can have the reverse effect when we're like burdening the marginalized groups to spearhead or drive the metrics, instead of recognizing that that's part of the holistic strategy around DE&I programming and doing that well.
And if I may, I know that many of our clients have strong ERG networks in their organizations, and employees and talent alike really respond to having these outlets of connection.
They really, really do. And I know from working on the contingent space, there's a tricky co-employment little line that you have to walk. But there are some ERGs that you can give your contingent workforce and your FTE workforce access to, that really make them feel, instead of a them and an us, we're all in this together. That sense of belonging, of being included in something, is just so valuable, makes your employees feel very appreciated, makes them feel heard, and goes back to that whole referral of how likely are they to refer this company, right? And we know that your contingent workforce is going to go out there into other places, probably if they aren't converted. How are they going to evangelize your company when they're out there? It's the experience that they've had through these ERGs that they're going to take with them and speak to others about. And that's huge as far as company morale or reputation when it gets out there.
That's so, I mean, RJB, we, during the tail, like about 6 months ago, we started doing sharing studies around childcare and work, and the experience of those ERG parent groups was almost like a respite. That even the study itself showed that the ERG support that they felt, or with peers that are in similar circumstances, was more influential than even their familial contacts of and lines of support. So just the idea, like you said, that we're in these waters together and we have some place where we feel like supported and like there's people around us that understand our experience, is such a compelling way to, and such an easy thing to turn on, that's so motivating and important for the employee experience. So thanks for bringing that up, and I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Question 4. We've had several employees establish ERGs themselves years ago, and we just kind of let them drive our DE&I agenda. Can you offer any feedback on that?
Yeah, we have heard this. We have actually heard this, that the employees kind of just spearheaded it and took it upon themselves to put initiatives in place. And I think it's so commendable to see employees stepping up that way and having a sense and pride in their organization making these advances. And I will reinforce what I alluded to before from the last question, which is just to put a caution around that, because the value of the ERG is when they are, respected, resourced, and supported from leadership, and not really burdened to drive DE&I programming, but rather an outlet and a resource for insights around intel about what the culture pulse is, around how things are going, around the needs of that ERG group, rather than as burdened to be responsible for driving the initiatives. So they're a component of an overall DER strategy, but they shouldn't really be burdened with the requirement to drive the DE&I agenda. So thanks for that question.
Yeah, like you said, that can really inform where gaps are in the organization. Is when employees voice things that are lacking or things that they want to implement. You can use that and say, hey, what do we have, or how are we not supporting this segment because it seems like a need has arisen and now they're talking about it? How can we support it and support them and implement something? And that makes them feel heard, included, and just works on both ends. Yep. Definitely. Question 5. This is the final question that we have today, and it relates to making the most of our Mom Project partnership, and it's similar to the one that we've heard previously. We recently signed up with the Mom Project and want to know what you've seen work well in getting our extended teams to invest in this talent pool. It's often just been a speed game. Do you have any best practices and tips?
Let me take this one, RJB. The biggest tip I can share is an example where there was clear and direct internal alignment and agreement on DEI goals that came from the top executive level. From there, it flowed down to all involved, ensuring that everyone was working towards the same goals. That really set the company and employees up for success.
Well, that's fantastic. I know, from the contingent side, we hear this a lot of the hit the ground running sort of mentality of the speed game of just kind of wanting to fill a gap. But when you've been intentional about how do they fit into our company culture? How do they contribute? Who's going to be the best? How am I flexible in bending a little bit in workplace autonomy? Okay, this person is perfect, but they can only work 35 hours a week. I really want someone who wants to work 40. Like, where's your give and take? And that's how you can really partner with us in finding that best solution, which might take a little bit of time to find that candidate, but at least this is a mom or a diverse candidate who is all in, who is going to contribute, who is here to prove their value. And over time, it's not so much of a churn and burn as it is sort of a long-term relationship that you have. So that's kind of, I think, best value, if I could chime in on that.
Well, and this is a strong contributing talent force. I mean, we have the data to prove that too and validate that out. The feedback we get from employers that choose TMP hires is that they outperform to quite substantial degrees their comparable hires or their hires not through TMP. So that's in terms of productivity, performance. We have a lot of outcomes that show that it's worth, like our JB said, some of the adjustments you'd have to make or some nuance in how you're evaluating candidates to be able to earn kind of the contribution that this talent provides.
For sure. Well, that, like I said, was our last question. Okay, so Adrian, these dashboards, and I'm thinking it's referring to the EEO data dashboards, would they tie into data in Workday? Do you have any insight into how they work with other, I guess, platforms?
I'm not sure about Workday specifically, but I do know that there's some flexibility in how they can adapt with other existing systems, legacy systems and things like that. I would have to look into the specifics of what those systems are to be able to really speak to that intelligently.
Yeah.
So the answer is I'm not 100% sure how those systems sync, but I know that intuitive technology is the way of the future. So I'm sure that they would, could, should.
Well, you know, whomever sent this question out, please connect with your CSM. I'm sure Ela is going to take this back to the team, and we're going to shop this around and figure out, you know, where it works, where it doesn't, kind of how we can blend systems to communicate with each other. So that's a great opportunity to keep the conversation going with your customer success manager on how this would work or how we can integrate it into kind of your existing platform. So again, thank you everyone for staying on for this Q&A session. As a reminder, we are going to share the video links and the full report after this webinar. Additionally, please, again, reach out for support via your customer success manager or your partnership success manager if you're here on the contingent side. We are more than happy to keep the dialogue going and help you, partner with you in reaching kind of your DE&I goals. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Adrian. Thank you, Ela, for an amazing discussion. Once again, these are always so much fun. So thank you so much for being a part of our kind of ongoing webinar series.
Thank you. Appreciate everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.